I do not know what the legislation is going to be. I only know what the recommendations are of the committee. However, whatever the legislation is, let's live with that for the next 5 or 10 years, and if we think what you're suggesting is an improvement, who knows?
And if we picked up 4 or 5 MLAs and start a local campaign on this issue for recalling them, for sitting in the House not knowing what the hell their own government is doing, I think you'd have a grassroots possibility of having Vox Popular out there understand that this is legislation outside of the House. Now these guys are getting paid. And they've even got a committee to raise their wages so they don't do any work. If you think of this issue, they're not even involved. So recall them. Simple as that. Simple as that. But it means public action. You don't have to go to another group or another committee or anything else. You go back in your own constituency, set up a committee, and this is a recall committee.
But I just want to conclude by making the point that the committee's report is totally defective in this regard, because all that would be required of the government if there's a successful referendum under the committee's recommendations is that the government introduce a first reading bill. Full stop. End of obligation. No mandatory requirement to pass it. So not only did this committee put in a bunch of thresholds which were totally unachievable, but even if you managed to jump through all the hoops and get the requisite number of votes and get your referendum passed by 50% plus one in every riding, you know, even if you met all those ridiculously high requirements, the most you got was a first reading bill in the legislature. Thank you.
This is an invitation to all voters of Vancouver to participate in a computerized voting system. I would like to propose that this non-profit, unofficial project operates until the government legislates and implements an equivalent permanent voting system. Why is it needed, you may ask? Well, our 126-year-old traditional term of office, which gives politicians the right to represent their ridings for up to 5 years, was challenged on October 17, 1991 by Rita Johnston's recall referendum. 83% of BC voters agreed to the recall. Since the birth of Canada, technology has developed new systems that could be more responsive to voters' wishes. Also, the concept of democracy has changed by including all adults, regardless of gender and race. However, the electoral system has remained unchanged. Democracy needs to be measured by the amount of people's participation, not just once every 5 years, but as an ongoing free choice. True representative democracy must be subject to recall. That is why this system is needed. Would you agree with the majority of voters here that an MP should be an MP as long as he or she has that support from the constituency? In other words, if for 6 consecutive months that person has lost that majority of votes, would you, if you were elected, step down, resign to your post?
I think even this thing is not in. If my constituency is not happy with me, I will certainly step down. That's my feeling. I don't think anybody should represent a group if they are not happy. Even I will step down from a moral point of view.
Would you be willing to resign if it was proven to you that you have lost your highest number of votes within 6 consecutive months?
Yes, if I have not been able to convince people that what I am doing is ultimately something that is a mandate they have given me to, and if I have stayed true to the mandate, you know, by which they had elected me to, I would feel that if I'm not sticking to that, by heavens, yes, recall me.
Members of Parliament ought to be more responsive to the desires and needs of their constituents, and I would advocate a type of recall system if it was well thought out and could be effectively implemented.
So that members could be recalled within 6 months? Or you...
If they lost the support of their constituents, then I feel that that would be a good idea, yes.
It's true that there's elections once every 5 years or whenever the government opportunistically calls an election. But the fact is that the poorer segments of our society, the disenfranchised in our society, have a lot fewer resources to even represent themselves within those elections that we have once every 5 years. And if we had the agenda of the wealthy put forth through the recall initiatives constantly, it would basically deplete the ability of the less fortunate in our society to fight back.
So you're worried that recall would give an advantage to people with money?
Yes, and at the same time, I think that we need to have a way of like in my work, we've taken public opinion polls. We saw that the majority of British Columbians were against nuclear submarines coming through BC waters. That's an example. Or to have low-level military flights in the province. And yet there was no way of directly influencing the politicians, even though we had the poll in our hands.
That's where recall comes in.
That's where recall would come in.
I'd have to think about that one. This is a new idea. You just broached this idea to me.
Yes.
I believe really in representing the individual. I only intend to represent people as individuals.
That's right. And
because only people as individuals actually exist.
That's right. But if you have the highest number of individuals,
yes,
you become an MP. If you lose that highest number of individuals supporting you,
yes,
would you resign?
I'd have to think about that.
Okay. Do you think that people should have the right to recall their vote, say 6 months down the road, a year later, if they get disenchanted with your performance as a member of parliament?
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't have a problem with it. I think if I'm not doing the job, people should be able to hold me accountable. But I think we have a British parliamentary system in this country, and if we're going to experiment with that system, let's do it at the lower levels of government and see what the results would be, instead of experimenting at the federal area. Let's do it on a municipal level or a provincial level and see what the results are, because it sounds very enticing, but you run into the practical problems of it and the mechanics of it and how you're going to do it, and having people who are elected always look behind their back to see if the opposition is trying to organize against them to have recall.
Given the case that you were elected as an MP, would you resign if for 6 consecutive months it was shown to you that you no longer have the highest number of supporters in your riding?
Well, what we've said is that there should be a mechanism in place to recall MPs, and we certainly are prepared to resign our seats if we no longer have the support of our constituents.
The question to you is then, would you like to be able to change your vote anytime rather than once every 5 years?